Okay. So you're seeing the screen also, no? Okay. We'll start this class. Today we are going to discuss about diabetes complicating pregnancy. So the rarely this question may be asked in theory, not frequently it will be asked. They will ask about, they will give the question like a 30-year-old primary gravida with a precious pregnancy, her GTT is so and so, and how will you manage? You may get a question like that. But in clinics, in obstetric case, you may get a obstetric case, GDM. Okay. So, what is diabetes mellitus? Diabetes mellitus is a metabolic, chronic metabolic disorder characterized by insulin deficiency leading to hyperglycemia. The insulin deficiency may be relative or absolute deficiency. It may be due to beta cell dysfunction leading to inadequate secretion of insulin. But sometimes the insulin secretion may be normal, but peripheral tissue resistance to insulin is increased in skeletal muscles and liver, leading to decreased sensitivity to insulin. So why it is caused means it may be due to absolute or relative deficiency of insulin or increased peripheral resistance to insulin in skeletal muscles and in liver. What are the types of diabetes mellitus? If you get a GDM case, they may ask anything about diabetes mellitus. So you must know some basic things. So depending upon the etiology, diabetes mellitus is classified into insulin dependent diabetes mellitus and non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus and specific types, and GDM is one more type. So what are the types of diabetes mellitus during pregnancy? So during pregnancy, when you are asked to classify insul classify diabetes mellitus, then you have to tell only two types, that is gestational diabetes mellitus GDM and PGDM or overt diabetes mellitus. PGDM means pre-gestational diabetes mellitus or overt diabetes. How do you define gestational diabetes mellitus? GDM is defined as carbohydrate intolerance of variable severity with the onset or first recognition during the present pregnancy. So this carbohydrate intolerance, which can manifest as hyperglycemia of variable severity, and it is with the onset during the present pregnancy, or it may be present before also, but it is first recognized during the present pregnancy. Then you call it as gestational diabetes mellitus. So coming to epidemiology of diabetes in pregnancy, the overall incidence of diabetes in pregnancy is 2 to 10% of pregnancies are complicated with diabetes mellitus. So of the with the new diagnostic criteria, the incidence has increased to 18%. So out of all the cases of this diabetes, 4% contributed by type 1 diabetes mellitus, 8% type 2 diabetes mellitus, and 88% of cases are gestational diabetes mellitus. The prevalence of both GDM and type 2 diabetes mellitus is increasing because of increase in obesity and sedentary lifestyles in the populations. Whereas pregnancy is complicated with pre-existing diabetes mellitus is also increasing because of increased prevalence of type 2 diabetes mellitus in younger patients. You might have heard one term MODY, that is maturity onset diabetes in young people. MODY, maturity onset diabetes in young, that is type 2 diabetes mellitus occurring in young patients, the incidence of which is also increasing. So they are, when they become pregnant, the cases with pre-existing diabetes is also increasing. So worldwide the incidence is between 1 to 14%, and in Asia it is 5 to 8% of all pregnancies. In India the incidence is 10% of all pregnancies. So classification of diabetes, etiological classification in general, it is divided into type 1, type 2, specific types, and gestational diabetes mellitus. These specific types can be diabetes mellitus due to genetic defects of beta cell dysfunction or genetic defects in the insulin action, and endocrinopathies. It may be drug induced due to chronic uses of corticosteroids, or it may be due to some infections, viral infections may lead to diabetes mellitus, like causing pancreatitis and all. Then autoimmune mediated diabetes mellitus. How do you classify diabetes during pregnancy? They are classified into only two categories, GDM and PGDM, that is gestational diabetes mellitus and pre-gestational diabetes mellitus or overt diabetes. So coming to Brisella-White's classification of diabetes mellitus during pregnancy, they are classified into gestational diabetes, then classes A, B, C, D, then R, F, RF, H and T. So what is gestational diabetes? So gestational diabetes with the onset or first recognized during pregnancy. The hyperglycemia may or may not be maintained by diet alone. So insulin may be required. So this is gestational diabetes mellitus. That is hyperglycemia discovered during pregnancy, could be controlled by diet alone or it may require insulin. Then class A is diabetes mellitus discovered before pregnancy. That is, it is pre-gestational diabetes mellitus controlled with diet alone. The disease duration may be of any duration and the age at onset is not mentioned. So class A is pre-gestational diabetes mellitus which is controlled with diet alone irrespective of the duration of the disease and age of onset. Class B is diabetes mellitus with the age of onset is more than 20 years or older. The duration of disease is less than 10 years. Class C is onset between 10 to 19 years of age and duration of the disease is between 10 to 19 years. Class D is onset, the age at onset is less than 10 years. The duration of the disease is more than 20 years with background retinopathy. R means, class R means proliferative retinopathy if present or vitreous hemorrhage is present. Class F is, F stands for nephropathy with proteinuria of more than 500 milligrams per day. Class RF means if both proliferative retinopathy, vitreous hemorrhage and nephropathy is present, or both the classes of R and F coexist, we call it as class RF. Class H means heart disease, that is arteriosclerotic heart disease which is clinically evident. Class T means the pregnant woman with prior renal transplantation. Because of nephropathy, she might have undergone renal transplantation and she became pregnant. Then she comes under class T. This is Brisella-White's classification. You all must remember this Brisella-White's classification. You may get a 2 marks question or 4 marks question regarding classification of diabetes during pregnancy. Though you may not get essay, but short questions will come definitely. That is screening for diabetes during pregnancy, or oral glucose tolerance test you may get, or insulin therapy during pregnancy, or Brisella-White's classification. Like that, you may get a lot of short questions, but essay is rare. Then coming to glycosuria in pregnancy. So if you test 100 women for glycosuria, it will be positive in 5 to 50% of cases. So normal renal threshold for glycosuria is 180 milligrams per 100 ml. So if the plasma sugar is more than, plasma glucose is more than 180 milligrams per 100 ml, then only the glucose will appear in urine. Whereas during pregnancy, there is a reduced renal threshold to less than 180 milligrams. So glycosuria appears with plasma glucose of less than 180 milligrams per 100 ml. So during pregnancy, there is increased glomerular filtration rate, impaired tubular reabsorption of glucose and decreased renal threshold. So all these three things will cause glycosuria in pregnancy. The significance of glycosuria is fasting glycosuria is a ominous ominous sign. And so first sample of urine, if it shows glycosuria, so it has to be investigated for GDM. And if the glycosuria is present on one occasion before 20 weeks of gestation age, or if glycosuria is present in 2 or more occasions after 20 weeks of gestation age, these are indications for glucose tolerance test. So when you are depending upon glycosuria, when are you going to investigate for GDM, or when are you going to advise GTT? Means you can answer like fasting glycosuria, or in less than 20 weeks of gestation age, even one occasion of glycosuria, or more than 20 weeks of gestation age glycosuria on 2 occasions. Those cases must be investigated with GTT. So coming to physiological changes in carbohydrate metabolism. So what are the normal physiological changes that occur during pregnancy in carbohydrate metabolism? You may get a 4 marks question. Physiological changes in carbohydrate metabolism during pregnancy. So pregnancy is a diabetogenic state. Explain how. Means during pregnancy there will be some physiological changes which mimics the diabetes, but these will be adopted and it will not be evident. So if this adaptation fails, it may manifest as gestational diabetes mellitus. So during pregnancy, what is the need? For the continuous supply from mother to the fetus, there must be more levels of glucose must be available in the blood. So glucose is much needed from mother to fetus throughout the pregnancy. So in the blood, more amount of glucose levels must be present. So to maintain this hyperglycemia during pregnancy, insulin secretion is increased. So insulin secretion is increased due to hyperplasia and hypertrophy of beta cells of pancreas. But though insulin levels are increased, but insulin sensitivity is reduced. By the sensitivity to insulin may be reduced due to increased secretion of anti-insulin factors. Like what are the various hormones that have anti-insulin effect is estrogen, progesterone, human placental lactogen. These are. So plasma insulin is increased, thus ensures continuous supply of glucose to the fetus. So because of increase in the insulin secretion, there will be increased lipogenesis and fat storage. Whereas if the mother is on fasting, there will be accelerated hypoglycemia, hypoinsulinemia and hyperlipidemia. This will lead to increased lipolysis and it causes the release of free fatty acids for gluconeogenesis and fuel supply. So this is called as accelerated starvation during pregnancy. So what is the reason behind the physiological changes in carbohydrate metabolism is there is a continuous need for supply of glucose and amino acids for fetal growth as well as for meeting the increased physiological demands by the woman during pregnancy, labor and lactation. So to provide these increased needs of glucose and amino acids, the metabolic change, normal physiological changes in carbohydrate metabolism will occur. So the placenta produces anti-insulin hormones. They are estrogen, human placental lactogen, cortisol and progesterone. So and these hormones will inhibit the functioning of insulin. Though the insulin secretion is increased because of hypertrophy and hyperplasia of beta cells in the pancreas, but the functioning of insulin is reduced because of this anti-insulin hormones, and so the blood glucose level will be increased. So you can see here, the pregnant woman, she needs more amount of glucose for constant supply to the fetus, and also for her metabolic needs during pregnancy, labor, and after and during puerperium. But placenta, from placenta there is release of anti-insulin hormones like human placental lactogen, cortisol, prolactin, estrogen, and progesterone. So these will act on the insulin receptors. So these insulin receptors cannot respond to insulin. So glucose transportation will be inactivated. So hyperglycemia will persist. There will be low renal threshold for glucose, and there is increase in the glomerular filtration rates. So this will leads to glycosuria. So there is hyperglycemia and glycosuria. So throughout pregnancy, there is transfer of increased amount of glucose from mother to the fetus is needed. So increased insulin secretion in response to glucose and amino acids, but there is decreased sensitivity of insulin receptors and increased release of anti-insulin factors and increased tissue resistance to insulin in liver and skeletal muscles occurs. So these things will result in increase in the insulin levels, and increase insulin will cause lipogenesis and fat storage. And whereas during maternal fasting, there will be hypoglycemia, hypoinsulinemia, but hyperlipidemia and hyperketonuria occurs. So because of lipolysis, there is release of free fatty acids for gluconeogenesis and release of glucose. So this will lead to accelerated starvation during pregnancy. So coming to gestational diabetes mellitus. GDM is defined as carbohydrate intolerance of variable severity with onset or first recognition during present pregnancy. Usually this GDM presents in late second trimester or third trimester. That is after 24 weeks, like that it may present. But GTT should come to normal after delivery, and it is a pregnancy-induced glucose intolerance. So unlike overt diabetes or pregestational diabetes, though that is diagnosed first time during pregnancy, if the GTT does not come to normal after delivery, it will be continued as overt diabetes mellitus. So coming to pregestational or overt diabetes, the diabetes that antecedates pregnancy is called as pregestational or overt diabetes mellitus. So if a pregnant woman if a diabetic patient, if she becomes pregnant, it is pregestational diabetes mellitus. So it may not be diagnosed, but it will be pre-existing. Because of difference in age specific incidences of two types of diabetes. That is type 1 diabetes is childhood onset diabetes, whereas type 2 diabetes is adult onset diabetes. So because of this difference in age specific incidences, which is more common in diabetes in pregnant women, is type 1 diabetes. But nowadays there is increasing prevalence of pregestational type 2 diabetes mellitus, which may be due to increasing prevalence of obesity and type 2 diabetes in young, that is MODY, that MODY, maturity onset diabetes in young people. And also one more factor is because of delayed childbearing in third and fourth decades, there is increasing incidence of type 2 diabetes in pregnant women also. So what are the main differences between GDM and pregestational diabetes mellitus? In GDM, in the early pregnancy, the blood sugar levels are normal, because in GDM usually occurs onset is in the late second and third trimesters. Whereas in the PGDM, pregnancy, pre-gestational diabetes mellitus, these elevated blood sugar levels is present before pregnancy and in the first trimester also. Because GDM is, the blood sugar levels will be elevated in the late second trimester, there is no effect on organogenesis. Till 12 weeks, the organogenesis occurs. So during that time, the blood sugar levels are normal, so no effects on organogenesis. Whereas in PGDM, organogenesis will be affected and more chances of, there is more incidence of congenital fetal abnormalities. In GDM, there is less likely to have congenital defects. This diabetes disappears after delivery. Here it will continue. Macrosomia is also more likely, but because of vascular involvement, fetus may be growth restricted in diabetes mellitus with vascular complications. In overall, both in GDM and in PGDM, the perinatal outcome will be worsened because of hyperglycemia. So coming to pathophysiology of gestational diabetes mellitus, there is insulin resistance due to placental secretion of anti-insulin hormones. So this is also commonly repeated question. What are the anti-insulin hormones in pregnancy? In PG NEET also they will frequently ask, what are the anti-insulin hormones? I have repeated 3 or 4 times. They are estrogen, progesterone, human placental lactose, and cortisol. And in late pregnancy, there is increased peripheral resistance in liver and in skeletal muscles. So there is maternal hepatic glucose production is increased by 15 to 30% to meet the fetal demand. And sometimes there may be pancreatic beta cell dysfunction caused by genetic abnormalities, autoimmune disorders, or chronic insulin resistance. So combination of this glucose intolerance, hyperglycemia, and beta cell dysfunction, it may lead to gestational diabetes mellitus. So what are the high risk factors for GDM? If there is a family history of diabetes mellitus, it comes under a high risk factor for GDM. Then there is a previous birth of overweight baby of more than 4 kgs, previous history of stillbirth of unknown etiology. We don't know the cause, but there is previous history of stillbirths. Any polyhydramnios there, recurrent vulvovaginal candidiasis, that has to be evaluated for GDM. Persistent glycosuria, unexplained perinatal loss, stillbirths, age of the woman more than 30 years. Then maternal obesity, some ethnic groups like East Asia and Pacific Island ancestry, their incidence of GDM is more. When the woman had history of PCOD and any chronic uses of drugs like corticosteroids or other diseases like asthma, chronic asthma, or other any skin allergies, they might have used corticosteroids for prolonged periods. That also becomes a high risk factor. You should remember these high risk factors, so that if you get a case, you must look into the presence of these high risk factors. So screening for gestational diabetes. This screening for gestational diabetes, is it universal screening has to be opted, or selective screening has to be opted? Universal screening means all pregnant women must be screened for diabetes. Whereas selective screening means the pregnant woman with high risk factors has to be screened for diabetes depending upon the risk categorization. So this is in Indians we have to opt for universal screening. So all pregnant women must be screened for diabetes mellitus, because we belong to Asian ethnic group who are at high risk for diabetes. Risk assessment for detecting gestational diabetes mellitus means depending upon the risk factors what we have discussed earlier. So depending upon this, they are categorized into 3 categories: high risk, average risk, and low risk. So depending upon the risk categorization, we advise the screening and time of screening. So they are categorized into high risk, average risk, and low risk. The women who come under low risk for gestational diabetes are age less than 25 years. Then she is not a member of an ethnic group who are at high risk for developing type 2 diabetes. So what are the ethnic groups that are at high risk for developing type 2 diabetes are who belong to Hispanic, Africans, Native Americans, South or East Asians, and Pacific Island ancestry. So if any woman does not belong to these ethnic groups, she comes under low risk of diabetes mellitus. Body mass index of less than 25. No previous history of abnormal glucose tolerance. No previous history of any adverse obstetric outcomes associated with gestational diabetes, like there is no history of macrosomia, neonatal hypoglycemia, stillbirths, IUDs, and big baby, if they are not there, and then no known diabetes in the first degree relative. So if these are present, then she comes under low risk group. So a low risk woman, when you are going to do screening, so blood sugar screening is not routinely required, whereas average risk group is a member of an ethnic group with high prevalence of GDM, diabetes in the first degree relatives is present, age more than 25 years, overweight before pregnancy, that is obese before pregnancy, weight high at birth. So these women, these average risk women has to be screened like this. Blood glucose testing at 24 to 28 weeks, 1 or 2-step procedure. We have to screen these cases. So time of screening is between 24 to 28 weeks with what is the screening procedure? 1 or 2-step procedure. Whereas high risk group, morbid obesity, strong family history of type 2 diabetes mellitus, and previous history of GDM, impaired glucose metabolism or glucosuria. If these things are present, they are high risk group, and you have to perform the glucose testing as soon as feasible. That is, if the woman comes under the high risk, if she comes for an antenatal visit in the first trimester, at 10 weeks she has come for the first visit, then you have to perform the glucose testing at that time only. But if she comes under average risk, you can do screening for gestational diabetes at 24 to 28 weeks. But if she comes under low risk group, this blood sugar screening is not routinely required. But Indians, our people belong to average risk, all people, because we belong to the high risk ethnic group. So we have adopted universal screening. Timing is at 24 to 28 weeks of gestation. Method is one step procedure or 2-step procedure. We will tell it in later. So the high risk factors will be, to repeat, morbid obesity, family history of diabetes mellitus, history of stillbirth, previous history of delivery of a macrosomic baby, weight of more than 4 kgs, persistent glycosuria, history of unexplained neonatal deaths, history of any congenital anomalies. Then history of preeclampsia in a multipara. Usually preeclampsia is present mainly in primates. If it is history of preeclampsia in multipara is there, that is also one high risk factor. Then polyhydramnios, bad obstetric history, any previous history of traumatic delivery with neurological disorder in infant, recurrent UTI and vulvovaginal candidiasis, and history of GDM in previous pregnancies, age more than 35 years. So coming to screening guidelines. So diabetes risk assessment is done. So if it comes under high risk, screen at confirmation of pregnancy itself. So if it is positive for GDM, you treat it. If it is negative for GDM, we repeat the test after 1 month. If it is with the risk assessment, if it comes as average to low risk, you have to screen at what time of gestation age? It is between 24 to 28 weeks of gestation age, you have to screen. If it is positive for GDM, you treat it. If it is negative for GDM, we repeat the test afterwards. So these cases, or GDM cases who are treated after delivery in the postpartum period, you have to screen for diabetes at 6 to 12 weeks. That is around the third month after delivery, you have to screen for diabetes. If it comes as positive, it is a case of overt diabetes mellitus that has to be treated. If it comes as pre-diabetes, you have to treat it, and you have to lifelong screening for diabetes. For every 3 years it has to be done. If it is after delivery, if you have screened for diabetes and if it comes as normoglycemia, they also require lifelong screening for diabetes for every 3 years, because 50% of the cases of GDM will develop diabetes mellitus in future 10 to 15 years. So ADA guidelines, American Diabetes Association 2016 guidelines, they have proposed that all pregnant women with high risk factors, they test for undiagnosed type 2 diabetes at first prenatal visit using standard diagnostic criteria. The pregnant woman without prior diabetes, you test for GDM at 24 to 28 weeks. The woman with GDM, you screen for persistent diabetes after delivery, 6 to 12 weeks postpartum for persistent of diabetes using the OGTT and standard diagnostic criteria. So if a woman comes with history of diabetes mellitus, she needs lifelong screening for diabetes for every 3 years. If a woman comes with GDM history and pre-diabetes, she needs lifelong interventions or oral hypoglycemic drugs and for diabetes prevention. So coming to how you screen for diabetes mellitus during pregnancy. So timing of this screening is between 24 to 48 weeks of gestational age. There are two methods, one-step diagnostic test and two-step diagnostic test. One-step diagnostic test is we perform 75 grams oral glucose tolerance test. So you give, the patient is on overnight fasting of 8 hours. So the patient is on overnight fasting for 8 hours and you give 75 grams of glucose syrup in the morning, and you take fasting blood sugar sample and 1 hour and 2 hours samples. If the fasting plasma glucose is more than 92 milligrams per deciliter or 1 hour levels is 180 milligrams per deciliter and 2 hours plasma glucose levels is 153 milligrams per deciliter. If any of these are exceeded, then it is gestational diabetes mellitus. Whereas two-step diagnostic strategy is, step 1 is you perform 50 grams glucose challenge test, GCT. This is 50 grams glucose challenge test. So the patient, there is no need of 8 hours fasting, or she need not stop any drug she is taking. So in the morning you give 50 grams of glucose syrup and 1 hour plasma glucose. After taking the 50 grams glucose syrup, after 1 hour you assess the plasma glucose. If it is more than 140 milligrams per deciliter, then you proceed for 100 grams OGTT. If this 1 hour post plasma glucose is more than 200, it is a confirmed of overt diabetes. If it is between 140 to 200, you proceed to 100 grams oral glucose tolerance test. So you perform this OGTT while patient is fasting, that is 8 hours fasting is required. In the morning you give 100 grams of glucose syrup and you have to take 4 samples. One is fasting sample, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours samples. So if the fasting sugar, plasma sugar must be less than 95 milligrams per deciliter, 1 hour is 180, 2 hours is 155, 3 hours is 140. So if any one is more than abnormal, more than these levels, then there has to be investigated further. So in one-step diagnostic strategy, you give 75 grams glucose OGTT, that is 75 grams OGTT, only 3 samples, fasting 1 hour and 2 hours. The plasma glucose levels, highest levels will be 92, 180 and 153. Whereas in the two-step diagnostic strategy is, first you perform 50 grams glucose challenge test. Here it is glucose challenge test. You take only one sample, no fasting is required and no preparation. You just give 50 grams glucose syrup, and after 1 hour you collect the blood sample for blood glucose assessment. If it is more than 140, you go ahead with 100 grams OGTT. In the 100 grams OGTT, that requires
Sorry.
So just to repeat, the screening for gestational diabetes can be one-step diagnostic strategy or two-step diagnostic strategy. In one step, you remember 75 grams of OGTT, fasting for 8 hours, then samples are fasting blood plasma glucose 92 milligrams per deciliter, 1 hour 180 milligrams per deciliter, 2 hours 153. So 92, 180, 153, 75 grams OGTT. Whereas two diagnostic strategy is, in the step 1, you perform 50 grams glucose challenge test. 1 hour blood sugar levels is more than 140, they have to proceed for step 2, that is you have to perform 100 grams OGTT, and the patient fasting for 8 hours is needed. In this, 4 samples has to be collected, fasting 1 hour, 2 hours and 3 hours. The levels are 95 milligrams, 180, 155, and 3 hour sample sugar levels is 140 milligrams per deciliter. If more than 2 values are abnormal, it is GDM. So screening for GDM is universal screening at first booking in the first trimester. This is for high risk groups. You have to do universal screening at the first booking. So if the fasting is less than 92 milligrams per deciliter is non-GDM, and single step OGTT with 75 grams at 24 to 28 weeks is advised. In the first booking, if the fasting is between 92 to 125 milligrams, it is gestational diabetes mellitus. You treat accordingly. If the fasting is more than 126 milligrams per deciliter and HbA1c, that is glycosylated hemoglobin levels, is more than 6.5, then it is overt diabetes. So ADA guidelines for diabetes diagnosis. For diabetes diagnosis, HbA1c levels more than 6.5% or that is overt diabetes if HbA1c is more than 6.5%. Fasting blood glucose more than 126 milligrams per deciliter and 2 hours plasma glucose more than 200 milligrams. You can say it is overt diabetes mellitus. Or any random sample more than 200 milligrams per deciliter also, you can say it is overt diabetes mellitus. So what is the ACOG, that is American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they have adopted two-step approach, whereas ADA advises single-step approach. By this two-step approach, the 5 to 6% of the population were diagnosed as having GDM. Whereas if you adopt this single-step approach, that is, you give 75 grams and you take 3 samples, that is fasting 1 hour and 2 hours. If you adopt this single-step approach, the 15 to 20% of the population is having GDM. So they are more diagnosed. But it is not well understood whether this additional GDM women will be benefited from treatment or not is not understood. Whereas here, with this two-step approach, where you give 50 grams glucose challenge test, then if the 1 hour plasma glucose is more than 140 milligrams per deciliter, you proceed 100 grams 3 hour OGTT, that is 4 samples is taken. Based on this, the result will be the woman who developed diabetes mellitus several years subsequent to pregnancy, it will be diagnosed. The evidence has accumulated the association of GDM with increased risk of adverse maternal and perinatal outcomes. Whereas if you have used this single step approach, this is based on demonstrated association between glycemic levels and increased risk of obstetric and perinatal morbidities. So, a single step approach, it demonstrates the association between hyperglycemia and obstetric outcome. Whereas this two-step approach, it demonstrates the likelihood of the women who are going to develop diabetes in future. So coming to symptoms of diabetes, GDM or diabetes during pregnancy, weight loss during early first trimester and weight gain or excessive weight gain during the second and third trimester of pregnancy. And they may have polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, fatigue, weakness and tingling or numbness in hands or feet. So coming to complications of GDM, they can be divided into maternal and fetal complications. There will be increased perinatal loss due to various complications which we will discuss. Then increased incidence of fetal macrosomia, more than 4 kg body weight, polyhydramnias, preeclampsia incidence is increased by 20 to 30%. Increased rates of cesarean section and operative interference may be due to macrosomia or polyhydramnias. Then recurrence of GDM is 50%. So if there is a previous history of GDM, there is 50% chances of recurrence in subsequent pregnancies. Fetal complications will be in GDM as such. There is no increased incidence of congenital malformations because organogenesis will be completed by 12 weeks, but GDM onset is after in the late second and third trimesters. So no increased rates of abortions, increased chance of birth trauma because of macrosomia, IUD risk is increased and unexplained stillbirth is increased. Whereas if it is a overt diabetes, then increased chance of miscarriages. The patient may present with recurrent spontaneous miscarriages due to uncontrolled diabetes. Increased risk of urinary tract infections and recurrent vulvovaginitis. Polyhydramnias is increased by 25 to 50%. It is mainly because large baby, large placenta, so there is fetal hyperglycemia leading to polyuria, that is more amount of urine is excreted, and hyperglycemia, this sugar irritates the amniotic epithelium and increased osmosis. So all these factors leads to polyhydramnias in overt diabetes. Ketoacidosis may occur, nephropathy, retinopathy, coronary artery disease may worsen during the pregnancy. 26% increased rates of preterm labor due to polyhydramnias and also due to infections. Preeclampsia incidence is increased by 25% and there will be maternal distress. During labor, what are the complications we anticipate? More chances of ketoacidosis, prolonged labor due to macrosomia and polyhydramnias, and shoulder dystocia may occur. Increased incidence of instrumental deliveries and cesarean section because of over-distended uterus, polyhydramnios and macrosomia, both atonic and traumatic PPH can occur. Maternal soft tissue injuries, perineal tears, vaginal lacerations, and cervical tears can occur. So in the puerperium, there will be subinvolution of the uterus and puerperal sepsis can occur and failure to lactation. So coming to fetal and neonatal complications, fetal macrosomia, congenital malformations, birth injuries, growth restriction, fetal deaths can occur. The neonatal complications will be hypoglycemia, respiratory distress syndrome, hyperbilirubinemia, polycythemia, hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, and cardiomyopathy. Long-term effects in the babies born to diabetic mothers will be childhood obesity, metabolic syndrome or syndrome X, and they also may develop diabetes mellitus. So perinatal mortality is increased 2 to 3 times, mainly because of hypoglycemia, respiratory distress syndrome, polycythemia, and jaundice. So how will you manage gestational diabetes mellitus? So our aim is to maintain the fasting plasma glucose less than 95 milligrams per deciliter and 2-hour postprandial plasma glucose less than 120 milligrams per deciliter. So our target is to maintain FBS, fasting plasma glucose less than 95, and 2 hours PPBS less than 120 milligrams per deciliter. So it can be achieved by diet, exercise, monitoring of blood sugars, insulin therapy, and oral hypoglycemic drugs, and obstetric management. So diet, exercise, and drugs. Oral hypoglycemic drugs are insulin. So diet is the caloric requirement is 30 kilocalories per kg body weight for a normal weight woman. If she is overweight, it is caloric requirement is 24 kilocalories per kg body weight. For morbid obese women, the caloric requirement is only 12 kilocalories per kg body weight. So of this requirement, carbohydrates must provide 40 to 50% of the total. Fats 30 to 40%. Saturated fat is only 10%. Proteins is 20%. The fat should be reduced if she is obese. So you have to add more fiber containing diet with complex carbohydrates with less glycemic index. So they advise 3 meals and 3 snacks regimen. That is, she has to take frequent and small diet. She has to take frequent meals and small quantity she has to take. So it can be the total caloric requirement will be divided into 3 meals and 3 snacks regimen. That is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In between, she can take snacks 3 times a day. So breakfast, it must include 25% of the total caloric requirement. Lunch should be 30% of the total caloric, and dinner is 30% of total caloric requirement. So this about nutrition, caloric requirement, and diet history. You have to take the detailed diet history for a case of anemia, and also for diabetes also you must be able to tell this one. So apart from this diet, you advise exercises. So increase the exercise so that this will improve the blood sugar controls. So minimum 30 minutes a day is recommended by NICE guidelines. So our target plasma glucose levels are fasting less than 95, pre-meal less than 100 milligrams, 2 hours postprandial less than 120, and between 2 to 6 a.m. the level should be less than 60 milligrams per deciliter. So if these values are not maintained, even with diet and exercise, insulin therapy has to be started. So blood sugar monitoring is, so these pregnant women, they require frequent blood sugar estimation, as the urine estimation for sugar is not informative. This glycosuria is not informative. So the woman requires frequent blood sugar estimation. So So patient cannot stay in the hospital for this frequent blood sugar monitoring, no. So self-monitoring, SMBG, they say, self-monitoring for blood sugar by glucometer is advised. The woman should be trained regarding how to self-monitor the blood sugar by glucometer. That is how to use the glucometer, how to collect the blood, and how to record the blood sugar levels. So there is 6-point sugar monitoring and 7-point sugar monitoring. It is nothing but 6-point sugar monitoring is blood sugar estimation 6 times a day. So if you do it 7 times a day, it is 7-point sugar monitoring. In 6-point sugar monitoring, the blood sugars are estimated just before breakfast and 2 hours after breakfast. Then third sample is before lunch, fourth sample is 2 hours after lunch. Then fifth sample is before dinner, sixth sample is 2 hours after the dinner. That is 6-point sugar monitoring. You can remember before breakfast and 2 hours after breakfast. Before lunch, 2 hours after lunch. Then before dinner and 2 hours after dinner. Whereas in 7-point sugar monitoring, apart from this 6 times, seventh blood sugar sample is at 3 a.m. Self-monitoring of blood sugars, SMBG. So self-monitoring of blood glucose is, it helps better diabetic care, and it avoids diabetes complications and diabetic extremes. That is hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia, ketoacidosis. They can be avoided by self-monitoring of blood glucose. So this is 6-point monitoring of blood sugar chart, SMBG chart. She has to maintain this chart, date and the timing, pre-breakfast, 2 hours after breakfast, like this. It's very easy. And seventh sample, 7-point monitoring means at 3 a.m. another sample has to be tested. So what is the role of HbA1c? HbA1c is glycosylated hemoglobin, and it reflects the diabetic control over the preceding 12 weeks. So for the preceding 3 months, what is the glycemic control? It can be known by HbA1c. Normal value is between 4.5 to 5.6, they say 6%. And if it is between 6.5 to 8%, it is glucose intolerance. If it is more than 8%, it is diabetes. The chances of congenital fetal abnormalities increases if HbA1c is more than 8 to 9.5%. So HbA1c estimation is advised in the first trimester, so that to see whether there is any increased chances of congenital anomalies or not. And it is advised in the second trimester and third trimester. So for every 3 months, you can advise this HbA1c. So other investigations required in GDM or PGDM complicating pregnancy are complete blood picture, CUA and urine for culture and sensitivity to know the urinary tract infections, liver function test, renal function test. Then retinoscopy to exclude the complications like retinopathy, nephropathy. Then obstetric ultrasound examinations are needed. So what is the role of obstetric USG is to diagnose the fetal congenital malformations. So with overt diabetes, the incidence of congenital abnormalities is increased by 8 times when compared to normal pregnancies. So to detect these fetal congenital malformations, this obstetric scan is required. It also needed to detect macrosomia and any growth retardation, and to assess the fetal well-being by Doppler flow studies and by biophysical profile. So coming to the when to admit a case of GDM or PGDM. So any uncomplicated case, usually we admit at 34 to 36 weeks of gestation age. So admission is required for stabilization of blood sugar levels and fixing the insulin dose. And early hospitalization may be required in cases of if she develops any complications like preeclampsia, polyhydramnios, preterm labor, any complications is there, we hospitalize the patient early. Otherwise, in uncomplicated cases at 34 to 36 weeks, we have to admit the case. Then you have to plan for appropriate time and method of delivery. So coming to, so admission, timing of admission is over, diet, exercise, then coming to insulin therapy. When to start insulin? When will you start insulin? Even with diet and exercise, our target blood sugar levels are not attained. Then you will start insulin. So you have to, before starting insulin, you have to admit the patient to fix the dose of insulin and also for stabilization of the dose. So once you start the insulin, so initial therapy is once daily basal insulin is started, then you increase the dose, very small units, that is 2 units for every 3 days. If the sugar levels is not controlled, you increase the insulin dose by 2 units per day. Then once it is controlled, for every 2 weeks, you ask the patient to come for blood sugar monitoring. So to start with, the insulin dose, the dose should be started at 2 units like that, and for every 3 days, if the sugar levels are not controlled, you increase the dose by 2 units per day. Then once it is stabilized and sugar levels are controlled, then you can discharge the patient and she can continue that doses and she can come for checkup after 2 weeks. So what happens to insulin need as pregnancy advances? As the pregnancy advances, the need for insulin also increases. So insulin dose will increase as the pregnancy advances. So in the 7th month, only 10 units may be sufficient to control the blood sugars. But as the pregnancy advances, the insulin dose will be increased. But once she is delivered, in the postpartum period, there is a sudden drop in the insulin requirement. So how to start the insulin therapy, I told. Then what is double mixed regimen? Whenever you are giving insulin, you use the combination of regular insulin and also intermediate acting insulin. That is called double mixed regimen. So coming to what is the role of oral hypoglycemic drugs. So since 10 years we are using these oral hypoglycemic drugs. These are also safe and effective. Commonly used drugs are glibenclamide and metformin. These drugs, they cross the placenta, they have no teratogenic effects, and in between glibenclamide and metformin, glibenclamide is superior when compared to metformin. And sometimes the woman may be already using these drugs, these oral hypoglycemic drugs, like if the patient, if she is a case of PCOD, she may be on metformin, or she may be a case of overt diabetes. Then these oral hypoglycemic drugs must be continued, and insulin has to be added additionally to control the sugar levels. So whenever the patient is already on oral hypoglycemic drugs, you continue the drugs during pregnancy also, and you can add insulin for sugar control. So how to calculate the insulin doses? You please remember, insulin doses is to be adjusted as titrations of 2 units. That is 2 units has to be increased. But insulin requirement in the first trimester is 0.6 units per kg per day. In the second trimester, 0.7 units per kg per day. And in the third trimester, 0.8 units per kg per day. So this is to calculate the insulin requirement per day. So if the weight of the woman is 50 kgs and she is in first trimester, then 50 into 0.6 is the dose. So out of the total dose, 1/3 is given in the morning and 2/3 is given in the nights. Then coming to obstetric management. So screening the pregnant woman, that is universal screening of all pregnant women at 24 to 28 weeks of gestational age with glucose tolerance test. If it is abnormal, you advise diet and exercise. If it is controlled, you with only with diet and exercise, you can wait till 40 weeks for the spontaneous onset of labor and to deliver occur at 40 weeks. If GTD is abnormal and it is not controlled with diet and exercise, you have to start insulin and you have to deliver at 38 weeks of gestation age to prevent complications of macrosomia and other things. So for women with gestational diabetes who do not require insulin, early delivery is not required. So you can wait till 40 weeks of gestation age for delivery. Whereas women with gestational diabetes and who are on insulin, but it is controlled, then you can manage expectantly and you can wait till 40 weeks of gestation age. Whereas with uncontrolled diabetes, early induction of labor is required, and if there is macrosomia also, early induction at 38 weeks is advised. If the weight of the baby is more than 4.5 kgs, elective cesarean section may be advised to avoid shoulder dystocia and also other complications due to macrosomia. So, during labor and if the woman is in labor, so how to control the blood sugar levels is, we have to start the insulin drip. And how to start the insulin infusion drip, you may be asked. So you have to add 10 units of regular insulin into 1 liter of DNS or normal saline, and it has to be flowed at a rate of 100 to 150 ml per hour, so that the blood glucose levels are maintained at 100 milligrams per deciliter. If hypoglycemia occurs, IUDs occurs. IUDs will occur. So if a hyperglycemia occurs also, ketoacidosis, those complications will be more, particularly during labor. So our target is to maintain the glucose level of 100 milligrams per deciliter. So we can use infusions, insulin infusion at a rate of 100 to 150 ml per hour, and glucose levels monitoring has to be done for every hourly. For every 1 hour, you have to check the blood sugar levels if she is in labor. So what are the indications for cesarean section in a case of diabetes complicating pregnancy? Fetal macrosomia of more than 4 kgs, uncontrolled diabetes, any fetal compromise by Doppler and biophysical profiles. If she is an elderly primigravida or a multigravida with bad obstetric history, or any obstetric complications like preeclampsia, polyhydramnios, small presentations is there, you can plan for elective cesarean section. So in the ward also we will be seeing elderly primi, that is a multigravida with bad obstetric history, with previous history of IUD, stillbirths. Then you post it for elective cesarean section at 39 weeks of gestation age. Or in the ultrasound, if it comes as macrosomia, more than 4.4 kgs or 4.5 kgs, you plan for cesarean section. If it is uncontrolled diabetes mellitus also, you have to post for cesarean section. So what are the precautions that has to be taken during cesarean section is, that case must be the first case on that day. So it has to be scheduled for early morning, and night dose of insulin should not be skipped. And morning dose and breakfast has to be omitted. Epidural and spinal anesthesia is better, and the blood glucose levels are maintained by insulin infusion pump, what we have described now. So follow-up of these cases is needed because 50% of GDM cases will develop overt diabetes in future 20 years. So follow-up for metabolic disorders and recurrence risk in subsequent pregnancies is 40 to 50%. Counseling the woman about lifestyle modification, weight control and exercise is needed. So what are the common congenital malformations in overt diabetes is, the incidence is 6 to 10%. Neural tube defects, skeletal defects like sacral agenesis, caudal regression syndrome, cardiovascular deformities like VSD, ASD, tetralogy of transposition of great vessels, coarctation of aorta and tetralogy of Fallots can occur. Renal malformations like renal agenesis, cystic kidneys, GAT malformations like duodenal atresia, anal atresia, rectal atresia, small left colon syndrome, and single umbilical artery, orofacial defects, and hypospadias. These congenital malformations can occur. If HbA1c levels more than 8%, you have to investigate for presence of congenital malformations. Because there is more chances of congenital malformations if HbA1c is more than 8%. That is a PG need bit. Then what is Pedersen's hypothesis? Fetal macrosomia and other perinatal complications are explained by Pedersen's hypothesis, which was proposed in 1977. So hyperglycemia leads to hyperinsulinemia, which is a anabolic hormone. This insulin causes lipogenesis, so leading to fetal macrosomia. So how will you explain macrosomia and other perinatal complications in diabetes is by Pedersen's hypothesis. Why macrosomia occurs means it is because of insulin, which is a lipogenic hormone. Why hyperinsulinemia is there? It is because of hyperglycemia. This is Pedersen's hypothesis. So how will you manage diabetic ketoacidosis? Is with, you have to give with insulin. You have to give insulin. And also, what is the IV fluids that can be kept? You have to use only normal saline. And they may require IV potassium, and also bicarbonates may be required depending upon the serum potassium and bicarbonate levels. So in diabetic ketoacidosis, you have to start IV insulin at a loading dose of 0.1 to 0.2 units per kg body weight to keep the plasma glucose levels at 100 to 150 milligrams per deciliter. So in the puerperium, the women who have delivered with GDM, you have to advise antibiotics because more chances of infection. The insulin dose drastically falls. So by monitoring the blood sugar levels, you can start insulin or oral hypoglycemic drugs, and breastfeeding is advised. Care of the newborn is, neonatologist must take care of the baby. There is more chances of asphyxia, and you have to check for congenital malformations like cardiac malformations, renal and all. And then blood glucose has to be checked within 2 hours after birth. Otherwise, that deaths may occur due to hypoglycemia, and they are more prone for hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, and hypothermia and also. And all babies should receive vitamin K injections, and early breastfeeding is advised. So coming to contraception, barrier methods of contraception is best for spacing of births, and you can advise oral contraceptive pills also, but the effect will be reduced. And progesterone only pills can also be used. IUCDs can be used if perfect antiseptic procedure is practiced, and sterilization if they completed the family size. So any doubts? Though it is a big topic, you will be reading this diabetes medicine, medicine, pediatrics and all, no? So you must know how to screen the pregnant woman for GDM. That is 1-step procedure and 2-step procedure. So you all must know what is glucose challenge test, what is 75 grams OGTT and 100 grams OGTT. So what is the abnormal plasma glucose levels to say it is abnormal. Okay. Then what are the high risk factors for diabetes during pregnancy, and what is the risk assessment score into high risk, average risk and low risk category. So depending upon the risk, when will you advise this screening? Then what is the screening procedures I already told. Then what are the complications of GDM and diabetes, maternal complications, fetal complications. Then how will you, what are the investigations that are required, and how will you manage it? The management strategies with the diet, exercise, insulin, then oral hypoglycemic drugs and obstetric management. What is, and diet, you must be able to tell, exercise, how it helps, and insulin therapy, regular insulin, combination of regular insulin and intermediate acting insulin, How will you calculate the insulin dose? 0.6 units per kg body weight first trimester, 0.7 in second trimester, 0.8 in the third trimester. And how will you divide it into morning, afternoon and night doses? And how will you take the combination of regular insulin and intermediate acting insulin? And complications with insulin therapy, hypoglycemia and ketoacidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis, and what is the care of the newborn born to a diabetic woman, and how will you follow up a case of GDM. So these are the things you will be asked whenever you get a case of GDM in your exam. Okay, thank you.